as a child, for me to have somebody hold my hand every day, I didn't have family touch me. I was pretty broken and pretty distant, but there was something, our souls knew each other, and
Yeah.
what's really sacred, and children can have that.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to take this opportunity and welcome our guests because I know for a fact that they're coming with a couple of things I deem very expensive. Their time, 24 hours, has been offered to every man and woman on this planet. What we do with that 24 hours will tell me much about you. It will expose your sins, as they say. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created Heather. It gave her a couple of things that we want access to, and we want to thank her and give her honor for that. And because she's coming and making herself vulnerable, open, so that we can have access to what is deposited in her. What was those? What are those things? Her wisdom, her knowledge, her insights. Those are the things so that you and I can be educated to become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. Heather, thank you so much for coming.
Ken, I can tell this is going to be a blessing for me, so thank you.
You're welcome. One of the questions that I usually ask, one of the first questions that I ask everyone that presents is for them to tell us how do they, because as I mentioned to you, there are two aspects to the journey, the independent part and then the interdependent part. And my question is focus on that interdependent part. And the question is this, Heather, how do you serve mankind?
By showing up. So I serve mankind by showing up in the best capacity that I can at the moment. And the service that I provide
Mhm.
has many different labels, but it's an energy that sits across from either a client, or it's an energy that sits across from a group of people I'm speaking to. And it's about sharing my stories, my personal stories, to help interconnect a bridge to them about healing pain, because I've had a lot of it in this journey. And now I'm free of pain in many ways, emotionally, mentally, physically, which is a big deal, and spiritually. And really, it's not the words that help people understand that. It's really my energy, just being in the space as a healer, and then offering some sciences that have PubMed research, or offering some creative arts. And really what happens within my work, which people, sometimes it's a mystery of how they show up. They have back pain. So they just think, I've got back pain. And we start doing some medical meditations. And all of a sudden that inner child comes out. That inner child, that those gifts that we naturally have when we come here on planet Earth come out, and they've been suppressed for whatever storyline reasons. And we tap into that. We tap into that because, whether you're an accountant or you're a lawyer or you're a healer, we sing, we dance, we write, we hold hands while we're doing whatever job that we serve.
That is, I love it. And that's why I love asking that question because it gives the individual the opportunity to give us a robust picture of their servanthood, if you will. One of the customs that we do here at Threads of Enlightenment is go back to our beginning. I call it the beginning of our beginnings. And that's usually our childhood in that location where they call the family. That space right there, we're going to learn a couple of things. We're going to learn our communication skills. We're going to start looking at those things there. Our beliefs are formed right there. We start developing patterns of behavior is also learned there. We're going to learn about our developing mindsets and so forth right there. This is where we are introduced to trauma. This is where we are given birth, if you will. What was your family unit like?
So I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my parents met in high school on stage. They fell in love and they married. And they married with generational bloodline traumas, not even aware of it. And as they started to go through their marriage, there were some things that happened that I always share with people because it kind of sets the tone for a little bit of who I am. And my journey is, when I was 7 years old, my father comes home from work, depressed, confused, sits at the kitchen table to tell my mom he was fired from his job, and he was fired from the family business from his dad. And it was all around
Wow.
contracts, and my mom screaming, and as a child, somebody that had, in my opinion, I was born as a healer
Mhm.
from past life, ancient knowledge. I absorbed that and I was concerned about the family unit. I was concerned about, is my mom going to divorce? What's going on? What do I need to do for them?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important key when you're talking to people who have traumas, and they don't have to come from the severe traumas that I'm going to talk about with my life, but any trauma for a child, because a child comes in with such purity and such a magical gifts. We're living in a time where we're healing that because we're living in the time where we're here for a reason. You and I, Ken, we're here for a reason in this moment. So the child takes on a lot of things that the mom and dad don't realize. And we're now talking about this, which is amazing because this is actually how we heal generational traumas. But my parents' generation didn't talk about this. There weren't podcasts. There weren't a lot of options back then. We have to understand history to understand programming as well,
Mhm.
generationally. So after that, my mom had to get a job for a little bit, a moment in time. My dad was put on antidepressants and checked out. And then when he went back to work for another company, it was roughly around 8 years old. So these are prime years. My brother's out of the house. My dad's out of the house. Every morning, my mom would come into my room, and you see this little innocent girl getting ready for school at her
Yeah.
desk, and she comes up behind me and she tries to choke me to death while screaming horrific things. And, it was almost like a show, a movie script. I would get myself together as children do with traumas. We're resilient. I'd walk downstairs. I'd see my mom at the kitchen table. The kitchen held a lot of traumas and memories and rewiring food. And she'd be eating a whole birthday cake, literally a cake. And that started the program of my sugar addiction. And I would go to school and I would immediately think to myself, I must have done something wrong. My being must have done something wrong because my mommy wouldn't do this if I hadn't done something wrong. So I got to change. I got to be perfect. I got to try to please her. These are not the programs that a little child should have at that time, obviously.
Yeah.
I always say that that movie Groundhog Day was my reality because as a child, you think it was I just made that up. It was just a bad day. And then the next day it happens again. And then the next day it happens again. And it's a tape recorder that's running in my mom's brain and her being. And so by the time I was 9 years old, I had severe brain damage, ton of health issues, over medicated. And that began the journey for me.
What a wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. I know. It's a lot.
I've
And
I've
for
done
those who are listening, take some deep breaths.
yeah, I've been doing this for a while, and that's a very traumatic story to hear for a young individual. And I tell people that trauma, when you take a young child, and it could be, it's their interpretation of a situation. And that's why I'd say there's trauma where it's this situation like what you've been through. And then there are trauma where that individual is excited about something. He or she runs to mom and dad and want to share, and mom and dad are literally busy. And they'll say, no, I'm busy. I can't do it right now. And that young individual will interpret that as serious rejection and start spinning and making decisions all through as something that benign would be so powerful. But here, this young girl is literally being choked by mom security. Number one, they're supposed to be a secured individual in my life. And this play is repeating all day long. She's 9 years old on all kinds of medication, as you stated, broken as an individual now. As this young girl, 9 years old, and as she begins to move from there, how did she make it? What was her survival mechanism? Because that is the first stage by which we put ourselves in, we create a way by which we are now going to manage the stories that are around us. What was her mechanism to survive?
Tap shoes. My parents bought me tap shoes when I was 3 years old.
Hmm.
and it was my first voice. And obviously, once the situation started to happen when I was 7 and I was 8 years old, I wasn't really allowed to speak in my household unless there wasn't really any conversation. I was there to serve two very traumatized people who had their own inner wars going on, which is generational, and I understand those wars now, being a master trauma. And then I'm in the war. I'm the scapegoat, I'm the punching bag, I'm the light, I'm the divine feminine that is so repressed and abused in both of them that they can't acknowledge it, look at it, recognize it, for different reasons because they have different storylines that I know now. So tap shoes. My mom loved the theater arts. My parents were incredible social dancers. So they went out dancing every weekend, and they were the ones on the dance floor that you would watch and you'd be like, wow, they are amazing. Never studied. So you kind of wonder, where did that come from? Did they know each other in a past life? Did they do this a long, long time ago? But when they weren't on the dance floor, they didn't have anything else in common, or they weren't connecting in a healthy way. They were at war inside themselves. They both had different types of traumas that I know now.
Mhm.
And then those traumas were going at each other the whole time. So for me, I got into the performing arts because my mom wanted, she was a narcissist, borderline psychopath. You could label those
Yeah.
things, whatever you want to do. I understand where they're rooted from now. You don't just become that. You're born through bloodlines of
Mhm.
trafficking and slavery. And she really wanted that sort of look at me type thing. And so I became that. I loved the theater arts and I loved a lot of my dance teachers and music, but it was sort of a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I was winning awards, and all those awards were for her to say, I'm a great mom. Look at me.
Yeah.
But they weren't really because they didn't build my self-esteem up. They didn't build my self-worth. My self-worth was built on, I have to do whatever you want me to do so you don't kill me.
Yeah.
Literally. And so that's a interesting, talk about PTSD. I know PTSD, like severe PTSD, and have a lot of solutions for it. But yeah, so I would say tap dancing, particularly because I could get some sort of voice out. And that began my channeling in a sense. I became obsessed with turning, and I actually created a world record in my New
I
York
saw that.
City days in my 20s. Yeah, for Guinness Book of World Records. But the turning was an obsession because as a child, I just wanted to escape and I wanted to go somewhere. I talk about like this other planet where people are happy and they just love. And then I realized later, understanding that concept, that it was trying to balance out because I had so much pain from the actual physical violence of the abuse. So kids are resourceful, they're resilient. And that's where, when I am working with clients, the creative arts and the ancient sciences come into play. Because if I can find something they like, whether it's writing or playing an instrument, it can start to tap into the joy while we're healing the pain. Because the pain can get heavy. Can't lie
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging to hold that space and to shake out traumas. I would say the other thing is, in school, I really had a mask on, so
Mhm.
everybody knew me as the nice girl, and people, like, later on when I started to reconnect with people from high school, they said I would have never known. I thought you had the perfect childhood life. But they complimented me in the sense that they were like, when you were on stage, I felt like, I felt hope. I felt energy and healing. And I always just assumed I was annoying because it was always kind of like, look at me, because I was always hungry for somebody to
For
look
someone,
at
yeah.
me,
Yeah.
from within. But I realized that at some point on stage, it was a safe place to be. It was like a home place for me. Not playing other characters, of course, trying to
Yeah.
find yourself. And then I would say the other thing in high school is I had a best friend, and I'm going to keep him private because he's in the criminal justice field, but I call him in my book series Miles. Miles and I met in 8th or ninth grade, and we held hands in between classes, every day, for a couple years. And it was kind of a big deal back then because we're talking the 80s. There were some subtle racial issues, and he was a black boy.
Mhm.
He really, I look back now, he was really providing with that holding of a hand, love and energy. And it was really sacred. And, I've known him when I came back from my New York days and reconnected with him. He was actually one of the most pivotal people in my life because I we kind of thought we'd marry eventually down the road.
Mhm. Yeah.
We'd go off on our journey and marry. But we came back in our 30s. We dated for a moment. It didn't really work. But he was the person that got me on the healing path to healing my childhood trauma. And really gave me some tough love input because he had done a lot of therapy and work on himself, having been in the criminal justice field. And I would say he was the pivotal moment. And I almost want to cry because I have a deep, deep, deep sacred love for him for those two really powerful moments. As a child, for me to have somebody hold my hand every day, I didn't have family touch me. I was pretty broken and pretty distant, but there was something, our souls knew each other, and
Yeah.
that's what's really sacred, and children can have that. And so thank you for letting me express that at this moment, because I think it's really important for people to also, it concerns me how children are interacting with each other right now in society. So I hope that this message can inspire parents, but also if any child is listening to a teenager, to understand that the sacredness of holding someone's hand with the intention of, I've got you, I love you, I don't want anything else from you, I'm just going to be here.
That's a powerful image, especially with all the turmoil happening in home, and there's no safe place, and the only safe place was a holding of a hand with another individual that gave you that connection. It's a powerful imagery for a young woman to have, being in the situation that you were in on a daily basis. Here's this girl. She's excelling in the arts, and she's looking towards college. She's now going to be moving from a place of trauma, trying to get out to now get on her own. What was that like in your life at that time, Heather? What was your motivation to move? Because I can tell, but which field of study did you pick, and why did you pick that?
I auditioned. I ended up going to Point Park University with a partial dance scholarship. I only knew dance. I only knew the arts. I didn't know any other option. And it was a great option to go to Point Park University. I can't say enough about them. My teachers were hard. It was kind of like the Fame a little bit type of
Yeah.
movie, the back in the day. The teachers were hard in the sense of like you would get some teachers that really understood trauma, like passiveness, masking and hiding. And so this was the beginning of me sort of like not being as frozen, not being as like, here I am, I'm going to do a show for you, da, 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 but like we could deal with different issues in modern and jazz and ballet. And that was like, we could deal with, sexual abuse, or we could deal with just all these different issues with art. So the artist was developed in my college years. And I ended up doing some schooling, like not, I ended up sneaking into a Carnegie Mellon University program. I was very, very determined. I was determined to become famous, partly because I wanted love. So I was very determined to become very good, and I was very disciplined. But I was also very much frozen and masked. So I worked a lot. I worked with incredible people. Even in my college days, I became, like a union performer before I even went to New York City. But I wasn't engaging in friendships. I knew in college that something was different in my upbringing because I could see the girls calling their moms, talking to them, and moms bringing them or, sort of sending them packages, care packages. And I didn't get any of that. Like I didn't know what that was. And so I knew then like something's off here. Like I didn't have a normal childhood, like a connection with my mom. Why is that? And once again, I took it personally, like there must be something wrong with me.
The arts are full of people with trauma. That's one of the arenas that attract trauma. Music, like, came out of there, modern dancing. I was a part of that when I was in high school and stuff like that. As you're getting to know you, if you will, experimenting, because that's all you can do. All you know is dance, and you don't really have an understanding, a grasp of who you are at all. As you are now expanding, Heather, and developing, what did it look like for her at that time? Because again, this girl is a traumatic life, and this being is now trying to become aware of all the other beings in their life and their lifestyle. You saw some of it where their mothers are being a part, and you recognize that that will never be a part of your life. How was she forming as this girl with no real foundation to grab from, no foundation, if you will? What was she doing? How was she forming self?
I don't think I was. I mean, I think I was just OCD,
Yeah,
personality A, obsessed with training and doing shows. I mean, enriched in art. I had a great boyfriend in my college years who I really look back as being a healer. He was at Carnegie Mellon, he was a jazz musician,
yeah,
and he exposed me. One of the things that kind of broke me a little bit was I had one teacher at Point Park University that was always pushing my buttons. And I had a strong will, and that comes from both of my parents' lineages. It takes a lot of strength to wake up with all the traumas that we have and feel either numb the pain with addictions, which I totally get, and I did for a while, or feel the pain takes a lot of strength and courage. But so I had one teacher at the time pushing my buttons, but I kept showing up. I didn't have to sign up for his class. I chose to sign up for his class. And I chose because there was something inside of me that wanted to be challenged, that wanted to break free. And my boyfriend at the time started at Carnegie Mellon an improvisation group. And of course, I had to go every Sunday, and I hated it. I mean, I was like, just tell me what dance steps to do and I'll do them. But I hated it. But every Sunday I would go. And then there was one time in my dance class that I don't know what my jazz dance teacher said, but it really just upset me. And I went into that improvisation that Sunday for 3 hours and I broke open. And that breaking open of like, I don't care what you think about me. I don't care how I look. I'm going to dance however way I want to dance started to break open me
awesome.
because we
Because
can use the arts to find
yeah,
ourselves if we
exactly.
want
Because
to. It just
I
depends on
know,
the intention.
yeah, I've, like I said, I'm a musician, I'm an artist and stuff. Like, I get it. I've seen some of those things there. And it's a great place, because you can express yourself there, and because you know what you're doing, others don't know what you're doing, but you know what you're doing, your intention, and you're able to be dealing with lots of your trauma there. I dealt with mine as I went through my divorce and stuff like that on the dance floor of all places. I would go on the dance floor a lot, and I'd be dealing with my trauma in that space. So here you are, Heather, and you mentioned that this young man and you reconnect, and it was in your feast that he now began to make you aware of the personal development aspects in your life. As you were given that doorway to make you aware of it, again, it'll take you years to really sometimes to enter in the door, but you were aware of it at that point. How did that entrance impact you as an individual?
Think for me, it's one of those moments in life. There are a few people that there's these big moments, and he played two parts of them because I trusted him because we
Hmm.
held hands for many years in high
Yeah,
school. I knew
you're
his
safe.
energy and he was coming from a very genuine place. And I think that's key here because you have to trust your teacher, your coach. You have
Yeah,
to, the divine lines it up for you. And, it's okay, like I always tell people when you're working with me, if it doesn't feel right, you need to trust that too,
yeah.
because I'm not everybody's teacher, we wanna really align with the souls that we can really help heal, evolve. So I think that the fact that there was an internal trust issue is I took his criticism
Mhm.
well. And I didn't quite know at the time what to do, but it's pretty amazing because now I work with 8 ancient sciences, which I've used my discipline of the arts to master and rewire the brain. And I don't have a blood disorder anymore. I don't have chronic fatigue anymore. My bone structure and my ankles and feet have completely changed. So I've done some pioneer things that now I'm speaking up about. So that all starts from that Miles, that one person. Everybody has their own journey. Sometimes it is that one person. It could be a stranger sitting at the park on the bench. It could be an animal. I'm big into shamanism. I'm a water shaman, but the animals speak to me now and they teach me so much. You talk a lot about nature on your show. You talk a lot about the forest. That's where I played growing up in the forest, so these things, but yeah, it was criticism, it was constructive and it was coming from a genuine place. And if I had let my ego get in the way, I wouldn't have asked really spirit, where do I go next? But I did ask, and then I was led.
Now, once you ask, and again, I love the fact that you mentioned the ego piece, because a lot of people, when we are confronted by the truth and with the truth, we will a couple of ways, the way that you received it, and then the ego way. And all it does is delay the process when you go the ego way. Those are the two roads that one have to choose from when that data is given to us, the truth about situation, and we have to react. People get angry and lose their minds, and then you have your reaction, and you were guided from there. As you were guided, because you mentioned so many different modalities that you are aware of and trained in as a result of this initial encounter with Miles. As you were at that space, you ask, and now you're being led, and this is where all the journey begins, the uncovering, the stripping, the wonderful stuff that we call personal development. As you are embarking on that process, Heather, and you are now going to learn about some of those traumas that you encounter as a young girl, you're going to have to come up with modalities to handle it, reprogram the mind. I mean, this is all the fun stuff starts there. Talk to me as to once you began that journey, what were some of the first pillars, if you will, that you noticed amongst yourself that you had to go in via tools that afforded you, whether they were meditation or whatever tool you use to go in to then to begin to excavate some of those dark places and bring them to the forefront and deal with it. As you began your journey, Heather, what were some of the first pillars that you ran in and what tools did you bring to assist you?
So I had some tools when I came back to Pittsburgh with Miles. Um, so what happened was, I'm trying to think, it was about 4 or 5 years before that. I came home to visit the family, and my dad's a blue collar worker. And he come into the office, a little back room. I'm like thinking he's going to tell me some sort of trauma because we had a lot of
Yeah.
them in our family. But he starts to teach me breath work and a meditation. He had hurt his shoulder on the job. This is like, this is when yoga and meditation, you didn't even hear those words in Pittsburgh. Like they didn't even exist. Okay. He hurt his shoulder and somebody was the physical therapist was studying Kundalini yoga and wanted to see if he could help him reverse his diabetes. And so anyway, he pulls me in the back room and he teaches me my first meditation, which I think is magical because my father abandons me throughout my whole life, but he gives me toolkits. And then when he dies in 2022, I start to hear him on the other side because I have to change some of the toolkits to heal the bloodline. And that becomes a mystical experience for me. So I become certified in Kundalini yoga and had been doing a lot of breath work and meditation work. But once Miles sort of set that tone and just gracefully walked away, but then he would contact me throughout the years just to check in. He would always contact me when I was upgrading, which was
Mhm.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I would wake up at 3 a.m. and hear a voice. So you hear that common in the Eastern world. And sometimes with people who have no idea what that is, if you hear something, you might want to listen to it. You know what I mean? So I heard the word Reiki. And so I looked it up. I didn't know what it was. Reiki energy work. And immediately this woman came on who was a psychiatrist in Pittsburgh who left the system. She was about 30 years older at the time. So she started working with energy and healing. And so I made an appointment with her. And I remember sitting, like I can remember right now, sitting in the parking lot, scared, not
Hmm.
sure what this is going to be about.
Yeah.
Wasn't I grew up blue collar. We weren't trained to even invest in ourselves financially. That was a big journey for me. So I remember sitting with her, and I do know that I felt comfortable with her, which was really interesting, like immediately. And then I remember after filling out the liability form and this and that, she said, "Okay, we're going to go in. Your father's higher conscious self is already there." And he was still alive. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, I have
Wow.
no idea. And that began that healing work. We ended up sort of bartering, and I ended up working with her on some Kundalini yoga stuff and then some water education. I soon became an educator because my dad worked for the water pipes and would come home talking about the chemicals. So that was another tool that started to come in, water education. That sort of started planting these seeds, started having a lot of pain, obviously, in my left leg. And I talk about this in some of my talks. I lose my ability to walk for 2 years. And that was really challenging because my strength was everything. I'm
Yeah.
physically strong. And
Dancer.
when that breaks down, that's a big ego death. You have to go into the stories. When I'm walking like 100 years old, feeling all that stuff is when Western medicine, unfortunately, just did not have the answers. I did that for a while. The physical therapies did not have the answers. And then I magically started to tap into just outside the box books, Peter Levine, all these legends, sort of groundbreaking beginner stages, and started to take it from there. And then I was transitioning in my work, like I was
Hmm.
teaching yoga and meditation. And then all of a sudden, I was getting clients in the science and medical fields as private coaching clients with trauma. And I think now looking back, after a decade of that, I can see that they were my guinea pigs. They were
Yeah.
my,
Yeah.
okay, we've tried all of this stuff. So let's see if this stuff works. Okay, we're going to check off. And I became a mad scientist, just like I did in the arts with trauma, because once I started going in and knowing that this is generational, where did these programs come from with my mom? How did she just switch and never, she was one person and now she's another person? What happened with my dad? It just became kind of a puzzle for me. And now I'm out of it and told to speak, use this voice as opposed to the tap shoes to start implementing more sciences and integrating them into more of a mainstream platform. But yeah, it started with one and another and another. It it's like when people hire me, they're, especially doctors, they're kind of amazed. They're like, "How did you learn all this stuff?" But it's through the experience of it. And I think because of the creative arts, there wasn't like, you know what I mean? There isn't like just one way of singing a song.
Yeah.
You start to figure it out. So it's like the formulas of, okay, I'm going to use a little bit of this science. I got to use a little bit of that herb. Okay, we have clean water. Okay, we have to do physical movement. There's some fundamentals that I'm very strong about in my theories with healing trauma. But then others of it, it's an organic sort of woman medicine dance, right?
Yeah.
That I never planned on being at
Yeah.
all. And that's the magic of life. And I always tell people when they're crying and I let them cry and feel, and they're shaking and they're scared, and we go through that. And then once they go through that and they're writing and they're figuring it all out, we either put on a happy song or we sing something, or, I got to tap into that creativity to balance out the heaviness that it can get with healing trauma.
Yeah. The arts, if you will, because one of the most important aspect of the human being is the imagination. And being in a industry that deals with the imagination on a constant basis, you had an opportunity to hone that craft of usage of the imagination. And when you're looking for people like a physician, a doctor, they're not aware of any of that stuff at all. Power of one's imagination. They're more on a clinical side as far as data, but the art is wide open. There's no limitations in the mind of someone that has been exposed to art. But there is only limitations when you're coming from a space like a doctor, and especially Western medicine and lawyers and stuff. They're in this box. So you being able to expand definitely can be able to go places that they will never be able to go. But with your information, you put it into a format that they will understand and a process. And once you take that and create a process which they understand, oh, they're going to fly and manifest. So here you are. Heather, you've all over the place and you've done so much as an interviewer. I am looking at that going, wow, where would I go with this? And one of the spaces I want to go with it is this, because um, not many people are doing that. And so you're one of the specialists, if you will, one of the pioneers, bringing the scientific piece together and all of that. How, as you said, you were ushered into that arena as you are able, because you were programmed, you had the experience of the arts, as I said. When you were being guided into that arena towards the scientific aspect, bring to us some of those knowledge, because again, most people here that have heard me on this podcast, they're familiar with the yoga piece and all the other stuff and whatever, but bring to us that knowledge, and how does that translate now into the personal development space as you're gaining all of this knowledge? How can I utilize some of that data, scientific data, to help me in my daily life?
Okay, so that's a powerful. I'm gonna see how I can answer that. That's a hard one. The things that I learned with the science medical therapist field was that yes, they are trained a lot analytically and they are afraid of the unknown, which is interesting because they'll do these labs and sort of this type of research, but it's very still linear. I did become my own research project. My clients have become my own research project. And I do have strong opinions about how we can really heal fully generational PTSD. And I think a lot of people have that without knowing it. It's sort of in their wiring without knowing it with a more universal blueprint. So when we're talking sciences, it's kind of an interesting programming game because I still think it goes back to who you listen to. If you're obsessed with a news station, you're going to listen to that person that's on that news station. If you're obsessed with a Hollywood person, you're going to be obsessed with what they say. There's this new fad or this new diet. If you're obsessed, so it didn't matter how much science I brought to my community, they were still not convinced of it because of whatever programming they
Mhm.
are tapping into. My biggest thing at this point, when you go on my website, I just redid it a couple months ago. You see the before and after pictures. You have to ask yourself, how did she go from here to there? Or when I talk about my bone structure, which nobody's talked about online because I've studied all of
Yeah.
them in trauma, why can't we get to that point? I think there's new levels. So when I talk about science, like, we talk about water in the United States, that led me down a whole discovery path of forever chemicals, parasites in the American water. And doctors have no education on quality of water, which is alarming to me that they would tell us to drink certain things that are very acidic. When you have trauma like I did, I'm already building cancers. So I've got to really clean out my temple. How do I clean out my temple? Well, it can be simple as changing like your water. And I think that that's like seems so simple, but it's not common sense anymore. And so when I talk to plumbers, they know that we went from copper pipes to plastic pipes, which is a big issue. They know that the water's bad, but they're not educated on filters. Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Doctors aren't educated, we're mostly made of water, and plumbers aren't educated on how to shop for a filter. So we have 20,000 companies online posting, and nobody, because you're too busy, you're too stressed out to even do the research to understand that there's only a few filters that actually take out forever chemicals, which is a really big deal when people have been physically or sexually abused. So that's one science that seems so simple and practical that we take for granted, that if I can change the way people like their filters. So I work for companies, like two different companies, for two different reasons. But if I can change that and educate them, that's simple because you're just drinking water. My biggest issue with the water thing now is my community, because I see so much plastic on the ground and I know it's affecting our lakes. You know, people say, I swim in the ocean. How did I get cancer? Oh, because we have plastic in the ocean. We have forever chemicals in the ocean. It's all interconnected once you start healing. But when people are traumatized, they can't think for everyone else. I was there. You're isolated. You're in pain. When you're in
Yeah.
pain, you're like on survival mode. And I get that. That's why we want to get people out of pain as quickly and as fast as possible with practical tools. So that's one of them. The medical meditations is not very popular here either, and I'm a big fan of them. They're called PTSD, OCD brain protocol. Childhood trauma brain protocol is amazing. These are protocols that I believe are rooted into India, but could be rooted into, if you believe in the Pleiadians or angelic realms. They're higher intelligence, and it does take discipline to learn them. You know, you're doing different finger placements, breath patterns, different vowel frequencies and patterns. But I have found that to be the most fast and effective way for people to find discipline within a formula, because you can't sit still and meditate when you have so much brain damage. Like, that's
Yeah.
impossible. But if you give them a series to rewire dyslexia is my dad had it, it's a form of trauma in the brain, then you start to get them in the game. And these medical meditations have so much PubMed research, yet why aren't we doing them? Well, that's where I'm starting at this moment. I'm starting to be a voice for them. Why are we not teaching our therapists? Why are we not expanding on this? Because it's not my thing. Is I did a lot of sciences that were band-aids, and band-aids are great. They get you through the day. That's great. But I'm about healing generational root traumas so that we don't have to keep doing this over and over again,
Yeah.
that we can really give birth to babies and have healthier family systems. So getting to the roots a little bit more complicated. It's not a band-aid, but it means you could live longer. You could have more psychic abilities, telepathic abilities, but it requires a little bit more discipline. So for example, if you go to a hypnotherapist and they help you with, like my dad did with smoking, that's one thing. But the hypnotherapy did not help him with all the generational traumas that caused all of the other behavioral patterns that he has. But if my dad had done the childhood brain protocol, a 15-step medical meditation brain protocol, he could have tapped into not only his storyline and his storylines, he could have shaked out that trauma. He could cry his emotions. It's a rewiring, it's a self-hypnosis. And one of the things, because I was raised by sort of a dictatory energy,
Hmm.
is I always want people in their own driver's seat. I want to give you tools that you are in the driver's seat, that you become your own healer, that you become your own scientist, that you become your own teacher. And I'm going to guide you through it. I'm going to support you and be your cheerleader. I'm going to be tough love sometimes. But at the end of the day, we need, like you said in the beginning, or I don't know if you said it before we got on, which was brilliant, independence, independent people, energies, and souls. And so we have to, I think, as leaders, ask for more now. Like we have these healing, we need to ask for more. And so I keep putting out there, we need a mental advancement center
Hmm.
to advance our mental capacities. And we need to qualify that and not just have one or two healing tools or three, but actually have 8 to 10 of them and teach the practitioners to utilize them as a dance. I think we had this probably way, way back in the day, centuries ago, and we lost it. And I think we're now coming into the forefront. So like for me, I love working with healers because there might be one more science they can tap into that brings them into using that module as well within their work. So it's not just working with the average population, it's also working with the higher conscious healers, because some of them too have a lot of trauma and they disassociate and always channeling, and they're not grounded into the practicality that when I walk out here and I go to a restaurant and the food's poison and the water's poison, I'm upset because that affects my community. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a result to that. I kind of went off, but
No, no, no. As you're talking, Heather, because you have such a vastness of knowledge, I want to bring you back. As you were talking, I had some ideas and after we get off, I want to talk to you about it. But what we'll do is end this one right here because I want access to Heather. We have to talk because I have an idea of something that I think we need her and we need to gain some insight. So what we're going to do right now is close it out here, Heather, because I want to talk to you after this. And I want to thank you guys. We're going to provide everything for you to get access to her so that you can be introduced to what she does and to move you through because she has such a vast knowledge of information that we need to do this another way. And she just gave me an idea. So
I think that's beautiful. And I just want to
go ahead.
finish by saying this is beautiful. This is why I want to show up. But I want to say the audience today to understand I was scared to use my voice up until probably a year ago, terrified to speak, to articulate words. So if you're in those shoes, I want you to hear this today. Listening to me speak, Ken giving me a platform to speak my voice is a really big healing for me and my mom and my dad. And so I thank you for that.
It is my honor. And guys, again, we're going to provide stuff. And I have an idea that I want to toss to Heather and see how we can afford her more time so that we can pick from her. Heather, again, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you.
All right, Heather.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully, you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.